Thank you, Phil, for blessing the service and remembering your aunt with the beautiful music. Good afternoon. I'm Karen Herring, a minister here at Unity Church-Unitarian, and I welcome you, Claire and Phil and Jane, and so many more of you, friends and family online. Gathering today, I welcome you to Unity Church-Unitarian here in St. Paul, Minnesota. It is fitting for us to gather here in the sanctuary to celebrate the life and mourn the death of Georgia Ray Lindeke, who was a member here for almost all of her 94 years. We join together for this time made holy by our attention and our presence, the presence of community gathered online as well as here in person, and by the presence of grief and loss sitting side by side with love and life. For those of you viewing online, I encourage you to stay tuned to this live stream at the end of the service for a slideshow from Georgia's life that you can watch then. As we open, I share with you these words from Robert G. Ingersoll, who wrote them in a letter to a friend mourning the death of his mother. After all, he wrote, there is something tenderly appropriate in the serene death of the old. When the duties of life have all been nobly done, when the sun touches the horizon, when the purple twilight falls upon the past, the present, and the future, when memory with dim eyes can scarcely spell the blurred and faded records of the vanished days, then, surrounded by kindred and by friends, death comes like a strain of music. The day has been long, the road weary, and the traveler gladly stops at the welcome inn. Today, we light the chalice in remembrance of the beauty and the music of Georgia Ray Lindeke's life. In sorrow for her death last July, and in gratitude for the lasting legacy she left behind, lifted up today in this sacred gathering. Please rise in body or in spirit and join me wherever you are in singing, humming, or even harmonizing, as Georgia might have done, verses 1 and 4 of the hymn, For the Beauty of the Earth, number 121, if you're here in the sanctuary. Friends, as we gather in gratitude for Georgia's life and for her many talents and accomplishments, we also gather to give voice to sorrow, to find comfort in one another, knowing many are with us, although we cannot see them all, and to give shape to the farewell that now finally must be said. As we do, we unveil a deeper knowing that the spirit of life rings out even in the silences of death, that love's embrace is larger than life and death both, that the seasons from which life springs circle over and over again, and that the grief we feel today in time may grow into tomorrow's hope, the breath of life and love eternally renewed as we continue on, carrying those we have loved and lost with us, each in our own way, healing what has been broken, learning from what has been given, and from what has been taken away, transforming our losses into the lasting beauty found even and perhaps especially in the imperfections and the losses of this world. In the midst of our grief, we come face to face with the mystery of death itself. As humans, we cannot know what is beyond this life. We can imagine a release from suffering and all our human stumblings. We can witness in ourselves and others the power of love and, in time, the resilience of life. We can believe in the very core of our being that the great promises of life are not lies. Love and beauty, truth and virtue are lasting. And all the goodness that was within Georgia will continue on as we who were graced and gifted by that goodness carry it on with us and as we share it with others. So we learn from death the preciousness of life and the lasting nature of love that grows beyond it. And we ask grief to teach us to name and honor what was good and unique in our loved one who has died, and to carry those values on, to live them out in the world as our true inheritance. Grief also awakens other grief. Earlier losses that you have experienced before, as well as the many sorrows present for all of us in this particular time of pandemic. Do not be afraid of grief's return and its lingering. Find your own ways of befriending it, and it will help you carry the sorrows of this time, as well as your memories of Georgia and other loved ones no longer with you. In this way, grief can be a doorway to a loving presence of our ancestors. Ancestors by blood or ancestors by choice, whose lives have illuminated and blessed our own. Please join me now in a moment of silence as we welcome all beloved ancestors waiting on the doorsteps of our hearts to join us on this day. You could say that Georgia Ray Lindeke was a woman ahead of her time. Or maybe it was just that she was keenly attuned to what endures across time. She was committed to help bring some of what was treasured from the past into the future. Georgia Gale Ray was born 95 years ago this past Sunday on September 19th, 1926, in Duluth, Minnesota, to Philip and Bernice Ray. She and her older sister, Patricia, near in age, would become known as the Ray girls, Patty and Georgie, lifelong friends, companions, and sometime competitors, as siblings are wont to do. The Ray family moved to New York briefly and then to St. Paul, where they joined Unity Church, and Patty and Georgie attended Summit School. The two sisters grew up singing, playing music, and dancing, tap dancing for family guests on the collapsible tap floor kept for that purpose. But the family's life was not always simple or easy. Georgia's mother, Bernice, suffered from alcoholism. 3 times she entered treatment for her illness and finally became a leader for women in Alcoholics Anonymous, heightening her youngest daughter's sensitivity to other people's judgments, while also modeling the sense of purpose and leadership that would become lifelong hallmarks of Georgia's as well. Both Patty and Georgia went on to graduate from Wellesley College out east. Georgia majored in art history. After college, following the end of World War II, Georgie traveled to Paris with 2 women friends and lived there for a year, teaching kindergarten in an international school. She and her friends enjoyed the city's cafe society, where they met James Baldwin. Georgie wrote home to her parents calling him Jimmy, and other artists and left bank luminaries. In other letters home while traveling through post-war Europe, Alida tells us after reading these letters that her mother compassionately described the destruction and suffering evident all around her. She admired the Europeans' aesthetic sensibility and their appreciation of the good things in life, however scarce those things were at that time. Her love of art history helped her to notice how much respect people had for their history, especially their beautiful buildings, a respect Georgie cultivated in herself and brought home with her when she returned to St. Paul. Back here in the Twin Cities, Georgia married Don DeCoster, and the couple had 3 children, Alida, Don, and Claire. Georgia played piano and ukulele, and the family often sang in the car or harmonizing on holidays, especially Thanksgiving. For 5 years, they spent summers on Madeline Island, where they owned a home and where Don sailed. Back in St. Paul, Georgia managed their household and was significantly involved as a volunteer and a leader here at Unity Church and in the League of Women Voters and in several arts organizations. She enjoyed gardening, fashion, planning menus, and throwing large parties. One of her early St. Paul friends still remembers the party she threw when announcing her engagement to Don. And years later, after she was involved in the restoration of the Landmark Center, she threw a large party in this historic building for her 3 children, inviting 1,000 guests. As one of you described her to me, her middle name was Party. As her children grew older, Georgia moved into more professional roles. She was the only woman serving on the city planning board in St. Paul, and was named to chair the Historic Sites Committee of that board as it began correlating urban renewal and historic research in a way that was never before done in this area. That work earned her a reputation as a, quote, articulate and forward-thinking leader, according to one journalist of the day. In another earlier newspaper interview with Georgia and Patty about their civic involvements, both sisters credited their parents with prompting their community engagements. And Georgia was quoted as saying, "I think Unity Church has provided a tremendous source of thought and energy in the lives of both of us." It would be difficult to name the many roles she filled in St. Paul, as a volunteer or as a staff person, leading historic preservation, urban renewal, and arts organizations. At one point, appointed executive director of the St. Paul Bicentennial Commission celebration in 1976, which was no small project. She knew how to get things done. But one involvement she was most proud of was her work to save the old federal courts building, now known as the Landmark Center. It was the most prominent building she helped to give a second chance, as she put it. There are photos of the building's architectural features on a poster just below the pulpit that you'll probably see later on. She led the charge in this building's designation as a national landmark, supported its restoration with fundraising and volunteer recruitment, and then helped find tenants to fill it. The Landmark Center opened to great fanfare in 1978, and today is home to arts organizations and is the site of weddings and other special events. Fittingly, Georgia's name is engraved on the wall there, honoring her efforts. These later accomplishments in the 1970s occurred after her divorce and while she juggled single parenting with the demands of her work and community involvements. She did not regard herself as a feminist, but some have called her a force of nature. She was a perfectionist, an admirer of beauty, sometimes drawn toward and into a good struggle, and not always easy to collaborate with. She was determined, always striving to make a lasting difference, and she did. In the 1980s and 90s, Georgia turned toward a more private life and to writing, especially devoted to researching, editing, and promoting the work of the St. Paul Jazz Age author Grace Flandreau. Like the many buildings she noticed in neglect, she took on the preservation of Flandreau's writing, memoirs, and biography, helping to compile, edit, or write 3 books still in circulation today, and reviving interest in Flandreau's novels. During that time, Georgia also married Albert Lindeke Jr. and embraced her new stepfamily, spending many enjoyable years joining in the family's activities. After her husband Al died in 2005, Georgia continued to be active socially, and she traveled too. In 2013, she moved to the Wellington Assisted Living, where she often played Chopin on the piano and participated in the social life there. When she later moved to Afton's memory care, dementia finally slowed her down. She lost some of the sharp edges of her fighting spirit, didn't complain, and was very gracious with the staff. As her strength waned, you, her family, came to say your farewells this past July. And shortly after you'd all left, on July 1st, she peacefully and quietly passed away. She was ready. Whether she was remembering an old home from her past or drawing upon metaphors for the unknown realms that might follow death, her last words were, "I want to go upstairs." So she has departed from us, And now we, remembering her, might name the lasting legacy of her life that is ours to carry into the future. An eye for beauty, a commitment to preserving what was worthy from the past, and a tenacity for meeting square on the struggles life brings. May it be so, and amen.
Maxwell ton brazer bonny, when early falls the dew, and 'twas there that Annie Laurie gave me her promise true, gave me her promise true, and ne'er forgot 'twill be, and for bonny Annie Laurie I'd lay me doon and dee. Her brow is like the snowdrift, her throat is like the swan, her face, it is the fairest that e'er the sun shone on, that e'er the sun shone on, and dark blue is her ear, and for bonny Annie Laurie I'd lay me doon and dee. Like dew on the gowan lying is the for her fairy feet, and the winds in summer sighing, her voice is low and sweet. Her voice is low and sweet, and she's all the world to me, and for bonny Annie Laurie I'd lay me doon and dee.
Beautiful to hear what I understand was a lullaby that Georgia sang to her children. And will you pray with me? Holy One, Spirit of life and love, source of all being and promise of all our becoming, we give thanks for the life of Georgia Ray Lindeke and for the many ways she noticed beauty in the world and added to it, often helping to bring the past forward into the future. We pray that in the heartbreak of our grief and loss, we might keep our hearts open long enough for her gifts to find their own place in our lives, that her love of beauty and harmony might grace our days, that her energy and determination might fuel our contributions to our own communities, that her ability to treasure the past and bring it forward might help us, each in our own way, to serve as a bridge between what was and what will be. Open our hearts today and always to these and other cherished blessings that Georgia shared with us and with the wider community of St. Paul. Blessed be, and amen. Now, Georgia's youngest daughter, Claire, will deliver a message of gratitude from the family.
Hello, I'm Claire DeCoster, Georgia's third child. My two older siblings, Alita and Don, are in attendance via YouTube today due to the Delta variant. Their love and support has been wonderful during this time. We have been a good team and continue to be so. I thank you. I also thank each one of you who are in attendance today. It means so much to us that you are here on YouTube or in person. Thank you so much. Alita, Don, and I were able to spend 3 days together with Mom at the end. Mom was on a low dose of morphine, so she was calm and groggy, but still receptive in small ways. She did some singing with us. She enjoyed getting her toes squeezed and legs rubbed through the comforter. She liked having her hands held. In the evening of the third day, when we were not there, she passed away. Community meant so much to my mother. If you haven't gathered it already, she loved her hometown, St. Paul, Minnesota. My mother also enjoyed her connections with a wide range of groups, actions, and organizations. My mother encouraged us from an early age to go out and be in the world. She may have felt she did not have all the resources to raise us, I don't know, but she continued to encourage us to join outside groups and activities. And I know that this has given me skills that has served me throughout my life. It does take a village to raise a child, and in our case, this was especially true. So my wish today is to extend a deep thank you to all those people who were there for Alita, Don, and me through our childhood and into adulthood. Extended family, neighbors, friends and their parents from the many areas of my life kept an eye out for me. When I saw you somewhere, we caught up. You asked me what was going on and how I was doing. And when we parted, I kept your well wishes in my heart. I kept your well wishes in my heart. You know who you are, right? On Ashland Avenue, then Ben Hill Road, at the Bratnobers, right here at Unity Church, at Madeline Island, at Linwood School, at the tennis club, Girl Scouts, SPA, and Grand Hill. I can see you there, surrounded by the light and moving colors of the place, and I can feel your interest and goodwill focused toward me. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I think my mother thanks you too. What privilege we grew up in. What rich communities supported us. Thank you, Mom. Lori Schmidt came into our lives when my mother married Al Lindeke. Lori was their cleaning lady. And when my mother moved to assisted living at the Wellington and later to the memory care at the Alton, Lori became a weekly visitor, being our eyes and ears because we kids lived out of town. Dear Lori, thank you for doing your role so beautifully. We also want to thank the Wellington and Alton staff for your skillful and compassionate care of our mother. You did a stellar job through the COVID pandemic and continue to do so. Shortly, we will be seeing a slideshow, and the very last slide is a picture of Georgie's new namesake. Collins, Georgia, born to Nathan and Gail DeCoster on June 23rd. Her nickname is Coco. Coco Georgia DeCoster. How fitting. Thank you.
As I said, Georgia loved to gather people together, to throw a party. Given the circumstances of COVID, it is not possible for us to all gather in one room right now, but listen with me while I share a gathering of voices, as is often our practice here at Unity. Voices remembering Georgia and sharing a bit of her life with us. This is from Patricia Ray Sanders, Georgia's 96-year-old sister. I always felt Georgie knew everyone and was interested in doing everything. Georgie and I sang with our father, who played the banjo, sometimes at our parents' parties. Sometimes our home was not a happy place to be, but this brought us together. Every day after school, we went outside together to play with the neighborhood kids. Parenting brought us together too. We took turns taking care of each other's children so that we could each be involved in civic activities. We worked on different things. We inspired each other through our civic activities and tried to get each other involved. From Leela Pallotta, friend and another member of Unity Church. Such a long story of friendship. Since she was Patty's kid sister, and we were all lucky enough to get enriching education at Summit. Ever since, we connected on and off over the years, when I was home on leave, much later from Princeton, Flagstaff, and for decades here during the Grace Flandreau years, and at assisted living during the end. I think of her as intensely interested in what was going on around her, sharing that enthusiasm with others, competently and persistently completing the Landmark Center project. This from Barbie Byers, another Unity member. I first saw Georgie and the DeCoster home on Summit Court in 1974 through 1978, when my friend and condo neighbor, Ray McGee, was caring for Georgie's lovely garden, hidden behind a brick wall. For more than 4 decades, I have witnessed and appreciated Georgie's commitment to St. Paul and Minnesota. From Amy Mino, Executive Director of the Landmark Center and Minnesota Landmarks. Georgia was a true champion of history and historic preservation in St. Paul, and she will be truly missed. Georgia's role in the preservation of St. Paul's historic buildings and neighborhoods, including the Landmark Center, cannot be overstated. She was the founder and chair of the St. Paul City Planning Board's Historic Sites Committee from 1960 to 1969. During that time, she worked with local community members to lay the foundation for historic preservation initiatives in several neighborhoods. At Landmark Center, then the old Federal Courts building, She helped guide the nomination of the building to the National Register of Historic Places, the second site to be listed after the James J. Hill House. With her guidance and expertise, the way was paved for the preservation of the building. She served as Minnesota Landmark's first executive director and helped to raise over $11 million to ensure the future of the old federal courts building. Were it not for Georgia's passion for history and historic preservation, St. Paul would have lost many more unique places than it did during the 1960s. As she diplomatically put it, through urban renewal and city planning, we have a chance to take some of our past into the future. We owe her a debt of gratitude, and her accomplishments will live on in the outsized impact she had on our community. From Alice O'Brien Berquist, a friend. Georgia was a member of the New Century Club for 50 years and was a recognized leader, intellectual, and creative force, and a dear friend to many. She will be deeply missed. We will make a contribution in her honor to the Minnesota Historical Society. From Missy Thompson. Georgia was a great friend of my mother, Emily Ann Staples, and became a good friend to me as well. We live in the row house where Grace Flandreau lived, which was a delightful connection to Georgie. Her passion for history was contagious, and there were many long conversations that we shared about Grace and about St. Paul's checkered past. Georgia was one of a kind and will be missed. From Jane Ransom, Georgia's niece. My first memories of my Aunt Georgie were of her greeting me and my siblings as we tumbled out of our car for a visit at her house. She was beautiful, had a big smile, and was very welcoming. Georgie taught us songs of thanks that we sang at Thanksgiving and Christmas. From a young age, she always showed sincere interest in me and what I was doing. I confided in her about a few things I didn't want to tell my mother. She listened seriously to my undoubtedly immature pronouncements about the world. When she came to our lake place in the summer, she always drummed up interesting political conversations about who the presidential nominees would be. In Georgie, I saw someone who was persistent, proud, and skilled. She had a confident and forceful personality. I saw a woman who took charge of her own life, whether in achieving victories or in dealing with disappointments. Even before Betty Friedan and the second wave of feminism came along, Georgie was clear that her life was her own. That was a great thing for me to see as I grew up. As an historian, Georgie was a skilled professional, and her love of history rubbed off on me. She helped me get an internship at the Minnesota Historical Society. She engraved on my mind the importance of saving the old federal courts building in St. Paul. She even had picket signs for the task. She was an executive director, an activist, and an author. Her research resurrected the forgotten St. Paul author, Grace Flandreau. Georgie loved her 3 children, Alita, Dawn, and Claire. Whenever I visited with her, she warmly described what each of them was doing. After some time, along came grandsons, Louis and Nathan. Stories of their doings poured forth from Georgie, too. And my Aunt Georgie took the time to know and care about my husband, John, and son, Mark, too. With Georgie gone, I'm finding there is a hole in the universe. From Kathy Lindeke Daubeck. Georgie enabled our dad to stay in his house and provided companionship to him for 11 years. Thank you for all your help. From Chip Lindeke. When our family was together at our cabin on the Brule River, Georgie often liked to serve cucumber sandwiches for lunch or dinner. They were very tasty, but our growing kids would often groan under their breaths, wishing for something a bit more substantial as a main course. We Lindekes fondly remember Georgie and are very grateful for all she did for us and for our father during the remainder of his life following the passing of our mother. Love and thanks to you, Georgie, and may you rest in peace. And this from Alida de Coster. My mother, in her life's projects, was a champion of the underdog. First, Mom was a great booster for the city of St. Paul. She urged St. Paulites to support St. Paul projects and charities, particularly the arts organizations such as the Minnesota Museum of Art. Second, during the years of drastic urban renewal, Mom took up the cause of historic preservation before it was popular. She gave countless talks, raised funds, worked with the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and was the key person to save the old Federal Courts building, which of course we now know as the Landmark Center. Third, her third great cause was to revive the work and restore the reputation of forgotten St. Paul author Grace Flandreau, who was internationally known in the 1920s and helped F. Scott Fitzgerald get his start at Scribner's. Grace was very cosmopolitan and ran up against the Conservative Society of St. Paul. I want to note today that Grace Flandreau's two first novels have been reprinted. On Amazon, Mom's biography continues to sell. Both the biography and anthology of Flandreau's works continue to circulate through both the Minneapolis and St. Paul libraries. Mom was a crusader and succeeded in most of her quests. When I reported to her that the Minneapolis Public Library had purchased copies of her books, she was thrilled. And this from Peggy Patterson Sands. To my mind, Georgia was a colossus, defined by the dictionary variously as a very important person, a marvel, or a larger-than-life statue. The word seems apt on at least two counts. Georgia leaves St. Paul, after all, an astonishing legacy ranging across history and the arts. In the end, though, and despite our 25-year age difference, I came to value Georgia as a friend. Had she never championed St. Paul's architectural treasures or written a word about Grace Flandreau, I would still remember her for her depth of thought, her ready sense of humor, her grace and beauty, and how much fun we had discussing everything under the sun. Yes, I admired her. Her drive, confidence, determination, but I also developed for her my larger-than-life friend, a deep and lasting affection. As we hold these memories in our hearts, please join me in singing All My Memories of Love. For those of you in the sanctuary, it's number 336 in the hymnals. Please rise in body or spirit.
All my memories of love hang upon high stars. All the souls I've lost to tears now the autumn jars. And the air around me here thickens with their song. Sing again their nameless tunes, sing again and strong. Willows in September touch the water clear. harvest all of the flowing year. Rising up from sunlit past comes the shadowed sigh, running toward me silently, love to fortify. Many are the graceful hearts hung upon this tree, and it seems there's room for mine on these branches free. And the sky above the tree, whether wet or bright, is my ease and comforting, my good news and light.
Now, friends, in gratitude for the life and gifts of Georgia Ray Lindeke, may we go forward with an eye for beauty, an ear for music, even and especially where we might not expect to find them, with a commitment to preserve what is worthy from the past, and with the tenacity to face square on the struggles that life brings. May it be so, and amen.